Lately, we have been shooting a lot of products for e-commerce, so I figured I'd share a few tips on how we get the best results in the least amount of time possible. The way I was taught takes a little bit more time on the setup end, but it saves you a lot of time in the long run. E-commerce photography can be an easy way to generate a lot of extra income if you have a proper and consistent way of photographing your products. But there are many roadblocks, and for those of you who have tried, I'm sure that you found it's a lot easier said than done. Simply placing your subject on a white background rarely works as well as you'd think, and using tools such as a light tent restricts your ability to choose how you want your subject to be lit. Also, relying on Photoshop can create many other issues, which will lead to you spending more time on this than needed, especially if you have a lot of these to get through. So let me show you how we get great results with very little time spent in post. Alright, so I'll do a quick example, and I'm going to use our GoPro as a test subject. And this should really show how important it is to be lighting your subject independently from the background, because the GoPro is highly reflective. So if you lit it like you were lighting your background, it could cause a lot of problems. So when shooting products for a website, there are a few different things we need to keep in mind. One is making sure that the background is 255 throughout the entire image, which means that the background is entirely white. This way, when we put the image on a website with a white background, the white background in our image will match the white background of the website. But one major issue when trying to achieve this is that all the light required to make your background pure white will begin to affect your subject. So to avoid this problem, we will need to separate them, which will allow us to light the subject separately from the background. I like to use a piece of plexiglass to keep the subject away from the background. So one thing I forgot to mention is that it's super important to make sure your plexiglass is clean before photographing. I know that might seem kind of obvious, but sometimes you get through it and then you get into post and you realize you didn't clean your plexiglass, and it's gonna show. It's important that the lights are equal distance away from each other and away from the middle of the background so that the background's nice and evenly lit. This way we can have a pure white background straight out of camera with a properly exposed and color accurate subject. So just for demonstrations purposes, my ISO is going to be set really high. I would recommend probably using a lower ISO, like 1 to 200, but because we're only using these low powered continuous lights, I'm going to have to raise my ISO up to about probably 800, which should be fine. But I also want to make sure I have a high enough shutter speed, because this is continuous light, where with a strobe light, it's going to stop the action and you won't capture any of the camera movement that you would otherwise have with continuous light. I'll take a picture just so we can see what it looks like with one light, and then we can add a fill card and even add another light if you want it to be a brighter image. One thing I would recommend is probably use a tripod if you are using continuous light, but for demonstrations purposes, we're just going to handhold it to keep our shutter speed relatively high. I'm just lowering our main light here so it creates more of a raking light effect opposed to being top-down light, because if the light's above, it's going to create a harsher light and it's going to reflect more light into the camera, and we're going to get more weird reflections from the lens on the camera and the screen. Right, so let's take a picture without any light, and then we'll turn on the background lights, and then we'll add the light that's going to be on our subject, which will also be a tube light, just a smaller version because we have a really small subject. It's important to keep the light source to match the size of the subject you're photographing. There are a few different ways you can set this up, but I've found the easiest way to be lying your background on the floor while elevating your surface slightly above using some grip equipment or even just some boxes. Being able to independently change the exposure from the subject to the background will ensure that we'll have a pure white background with an accurately represented subject. You can really use any lights you like, but I've found 3 to 4 lights to be ideal. 2 for the background to ensure it's evenly lit, and 1 to 2 for the subject. I hope this video has been helpful, and let me know if this technique works for you. Also, feel free to leave me a comment if you think you have a better solution. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.